Hello, and welcome to Science Streams. And I am so happy to have Lauren Haygood here again with us for another wonderful chat, a repeat appearance by Lauren. And currently, she is a graduate PhD student at Oklahoma State University in the Boone Pickens School of Geology. Previously, she had earned her BS and Master of Science in Geosciences at the University of Tulsa. And she was selected for AGU's Voices for Science Policy Cohort 2020-2021, and it's a student representative of the Science and Policy Committee for SWCS, serve on the Climate Change Committee of AFS, and is on the board of the Oklahoma Geo Team. That is a lot of stuff for someone just starting their PhD. And there's a bunch of other stuff on your page that people can look at as well. That's all I was reading off of. So quite the resume already. And I'm excited to see your journey kind of take shape, Lauren, as you keep exploring geosciences. So maybe, is there anything else I missed?
No, I think you got everything. That was pretty good. Thank you.
Good. How are you liking the program so far? I mean, you just started, so it's kind of hard to really gauge, but I mean, are you already completely stressed out, or are you still in that beginning stage?
I would say I'm still in the beginning stage. I kind of lucked out and was able to come early, so I moved to Stillwater in like late June, early July, and so that kind of helped me get settled in and sort of meet people and professors who are already on campus. But I know who my advisor was going to be and who my advisor still is, and she's been really great and really helpful in getting me connected with different professors who can help me with outreach and other stuff. And so far, I'd say I'm not stressed, but you might ask me in the middle of the semester, or maybe in a few more weeks.
Yeah, and I think I've spoken to quite a few PhD students, many as well, because you invited me to come on here as well. And it seems there's good stress and there's bad stress. Like you have a certain expectation. It's kind of like when you're in school, you have the expectation you're gonna have to study and you're gonna be stressed about your finals or your projects. That's fine, but it's like you were saying, also being stressed about moving and finding a place to live, and about, oh, is my team going to be good to work with? Because a lot of people, when they go into a program, they don't really know the team that they're going to work with. And I think you kind of have that covered, right? You don't have that stress.
Yeah. I went through the moving stress, but I've had a few months now to recover from that. So it's now I now laugh when I look back at moving. I'm like, oh, that was such a funny time. Not during it, but looking back now, it's like, oh, haha, that was so funny. But yeah, and but I like my lab group. I like my advisors, so that's been good.
So it sounds like your advisor is kind of hooking you up and making it easy enough to kind of, come in at the ground floor and know what's going on.
Yeah, and she helped me write a proposal before even starting, so that was really convenient that we got to meet and sort of work on stuff like early-ish. So that was really cool that she was willing to like sort of be like, yeah, I'll hit the ground running with you, like let's go. So
Yeah, that's great. That takes a lot off your mind, that kind of stuff. Hey, Michael. Yeah, welcome to September, right? I mean, this month is already crazy enough, for me at least. And Lauren, I know it's crazy for you just because there's so many new things happening, and you're just kind of getting used to things. Oof. It's a crazy
yeah.
school year. I don't know what it's like on your campus, but almost every campus, whether it's pre-K to higher ed, it's crazy, I think.
Oh yeah, it's crazy over here too. Like it's it's just every day there's always like something. It's like, oh, like, it's the thing of the day. So,
It's right. There's some other rule change or some other, something else going on. Something's canceled or something is back in session or
yeah, or
something like
it's
that.
like it was gonna be in person and now it's virtual. Then no, it's back in person. No, no, now
Hmm.
it's virtual, and you're just like,
Yep. I had that with the regional science conference. I was like, they were like, oh, it's going to be virtual. They're like, no, no, no. The rates are down. We're going to have it in person. And then they're like, no, we decided we're going to have it virtual. I'm just kind of like, really? I'll wear a mask the whole time. I'll get vaccinated a second time. Just let me do it in person. You know, I don't care. I'm
yeah,
tired of not as much as I love this medium. It's great for this, but as far as like conferences and like meeting people and going over like lab stuff, because we're doing some lab stuff here later, in person is just so much better. Um,
yeah, it is. It for sure is.
so let's get into the science, Lauren. We don't have a lot of time tonight.
Okay.
Do you know what your research is going to be on yet? I mean, you said you already had your proposal ahead of time. That's way ahead of a lot of people for PhDs, by the way. So you kind of already know what you're gonna do.
Yeah, so that was kind of at least if it gets accepted, then that will be one project, but
Hmm.
kind of and we've talked about some side projects too, but kind of like the general idea is trace metal, aquatic, uh, geochemistry,
Hmm.
and kind of still doing some stuff with freshwater, at least that incorporates freshwater, but also expanding to include marine studies as well. So, um, that's kind
Hmm.
of the general like umbrella, I guess, right now, and we're just kind of waiting to see if that proposal gets accepted and kind of
Hmm.
going from there.
I mean,
But
is it
yeah.
basically, does this water have toxic things or not? I mean, is that as simple as that? Or is it more, I mean, I know it's more complex in a lot of ways, like statistics and things like that, but is that basically the question you're asking?
Kind of similar. One of it's more paleo, so it's looking sort of, I guess, looking back in time about
Hmm.
how some trace metals were sort of incorporated into the marine environment. But then another one's more geospatial with metals and sort of like seeing how if we can like follow them as they migrate into the ocean. So
Okay, so like if metals are released on a up in a mountain and then you can see them flow down into the ocean. Kind of
yeah,
like when they put traces in your body and they see where those metals, those radioactive
yeah.
things go in your body.
Yeah. So like we're just gonna follow them and see like if we can find some hot spots or even like
Hmm.
sort of thing. So yeah,
And
yeah.
certain areas I would expect would have some level of like background toxological like
Oh
levels,
yeah,
right? So like
yeah.
because some areas have just naturally occurring, they have more background than others.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah. Like areas with shale, you're already gonna have like higher levels of heavy metals just because heavy metals are found in shale. So you're gonna get input naturally just because of that. So,
hmm. Would you also find heavy metals in slate then too?
yeah.
Okay, see, I know some science. So it's a good thing because I teach it. Did I tell you I'm actually teaching? I think I told you I'm teaching 10th grade earth science lab this year.
Oh
Um,
nice.
yeah, so we'll get a little bit more into that later. And I am not an earth science person by trade. In fact, the opposite. Like I hadn't taken an earth science class, so I went to college.
Okay.
Not that I didn't know it. I knew a lot more than I thought I knew. But mostly from Boy Scouts. Um, but uh, I, I've learned a lot over the last 8, 19 years of teaching. Not that I've taught it that long from the beginning. All right. Can you suggest a way that we can examine water at home? Right now, from my area, people drink from boiling water in the river, but I think heat doesn't guarantee the bacteria. Well, you can't also boil away like toxic chemicals either.
Yeah, so that's I love talking to people about the whole boiling water thing. So they will put out boil water advisories when bacteria levels are considered too high for humans to safely to consume the water. And so by boiling the water, you're going to kill off the bacteria, but with boiling water you're also causing some of it to sort of like evaporate out, and so what you're essentially doing is you're concentrating any heavy metals that are present in your water in the boiled water. And so when we had what we referred to as snowmageddon um, in the springtime, at least like over here we called it snowmageddon. um, it was kind of like they put up boil advisories, but then me and some other people were also sharing, like, if you actually want to take out the heavy metals too, then you have to like distill the water. So you would boil it and then like put a plate or something on top of where you boiled your water at, and then try and basically only use the water that kind of like ends up condensing from kind of like the steam, and that would have very few heavy metals and no bacteria, versus just boiled water would also have heavy metals still if you had heavy metals in your water. But that's also a lot more complicated to do than just boiling water. And distilled water isn't great to just drink either, so it's kind of like
Tastes funny.
Yeah, and it's just not like ideal.
I'll also say
Consistently, but short term possibly. But
distilling water without actual like lab equipment is it like it make it look easy sometimes when like you see these like survival videos and stuff, and you're like, you will get such paltry quantities of water from distilling. Whenever I've tried to do it, because I do a lab with my 8th graders where we separate mixtures, right? And one of the ways to separate your mixture of water and whatever is, of course, to boil the water and then collect that water through condensation. And that's hard to do and get a lot of it, because so much of that water turns into a gas and doesn't condensate. It's just gone. So I don't know the exact percentage. I'd have to do a calculation for how much you actually get from so it's not easy to do unless you have soxhlets and nice fancy equipment.
Yeah, you really have to be dedicated to spending a lot of time doing that to get.
You have to be stranded on a desert island.
Yeah, I mean that could be enough motivation to do
it. Back to the question though, is there a method to test for like heavy metals and things in your water? I know I can go to Lowe's or Home Depot and pick up a kit, I think they have, but maybe don't live someplace that has a Lowe's or a Home Depot.
Yeah, so there's kits you can pick up. Otherwise, there's other kits out there that just involve test strips that are almost I don't want to say they're similar to pH paper, but I mean they're similar in the fact that you can just like dip them in and pull them out, and then you have a color chart to work off of, and depending on what color the square of the particular thing you're looking at correlates to how much of it you have in your water. And that's a really simple quick test to do, because that's like 2 minutes tops. And then also it varies by state, but at least sometimes you have your Department of Environmental Quality that could potentially do water testing for you for free or for like a very small fee, because it varies by state. But that's also another option if you wanted like to have it tested by a lab.
Michael lives in Vietnam.
Okay, then probably not the DEQ. But there's test strips, and you can get them on like Amazon too. Like water test strips to test for heavy metals and other things as well. So.
Yeah. Is there? I mean, there's also ways where you can collect a sample and then send it to a lab as well. Often.
Oh yeah, you can do that, and if you do that, typically it's recommended to reach out to the lab and sort of figure out how many samples you're going to send them and kind of like what they need, and then typically they'll send you the supplies necessary to collect the sample and send you instructions on how to do all that and how to ship it back to them, and then they'll run it and give you values back from whatever it was that you wanted them to test for.
Hmm. Very good. And this is something that has become, this will like date me on how old I am, I guess. Back in the day, you just couldn't go out and buy these tests. I mean, they had to be done in a lab, and it would be done mainly by your Department of Environmental Conservation or whatever, at the state level. And it's only within I think for the like 5 to 10 years that these test kits have become very available. I think like the lead for like testing the lead in paint was one of the first ones to come out, that I remember seeing. But now it's fairly common to see these types of these kits.
Yeah, no, it for sure has, at least in my experience, too, from what I've seen, it's become very common, and I like to use them when doing outreach stuff just because it's a really convenient way to sort of do like a quick test, or at least give them to people if they want to test water, because it's safe and typically they're reliable too, and are sort of comparable to drinking water standards and EPA stuff. So it's very convenient for other people to utilize and sort of learn about water quality. So,
Do you also have like a sample of really like disturbingly bad water
oh
that
yeah,
you have as a comparison? You're like, look, this is your water. This is water you don't want to drink.
oh yeah, like every single time I do a water outreach event, like whether it's citizen science or just zooming with a classroom or like whatever it is, I will always have a water sample that is just terrible water quality, just all around. Like it's just gonna be bad, and then I have ones that aren't good, or I'll have them bring me one that like is gonna be a lot better, and I'm like, here's the bad one. Here's is this much better. Like yes.
Now,
So
have we ever done a session? We're doing a workshop testing water, and you actually find water that's like, you're like, uh-oh. And you're just kind of like, maybe we should do something about this.
I have, because at least wherever I would do them on the Arkansas River, like it's generally well known that rivers, at least in the Oklahoma part, it isn't like super great water quality. But some of the stuff we tested for, we were out there, like I wasn't expecting to really see anything, and then it like showed the result. And I was like, oh, now I have to like explain this to people, and because they're right there. It's not like you can be like, don't look at the numbers. Like they all saw
Yeah.
the numbers. So.
And someone's already been like, yeah, we drink and bathe in it all the time.
Oh yeah, that's like the other awkward thing is like I'll see people out on water systems that don't have good water quality and aren't good for some time of that, and they'll be like refilling their water bottle or something else, and we're all like, no, don't do that. Like it's not great water quality, but I direct them. There's an EPA website like How's My Waterway, and so I just direct people to that because it at least shows you within like your location or state, however you want to look at it, like how's the water around where you're at. Because like,
Yep. A lot of it, I know, I'm right on the Hudson River, and the river itself, unless it's been raining a lot and the sewage overflows, is usually the water itself. I hear is pretty good now. It's only if you stir up the mud, which might still have PCBs in it. It other stuff from back in the day, when there's a lot of industry. And I imagine that's the case with rivers all over the country, where the water itself now is much better, but the sediments and the mud, the places where the mussels live, your lovely mussels, that's a little bit more dirty.
yeah, that's very true. That sediment is a big issue. Like once it gets disturbed, and it's also, at least for Oklahoma, that's like one of the main impairments is just having too much of that sediment in our water systems, then it sort of just ruins. It just degrades the water quality. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
All right, so this gets Michael's talking about. I think we can examine water freshness by observing the creatures living in it, which is true. For example, shrimp mostly lives in fresh water, so we can somehow believe the water there is drinkable.
That's a good observation. And at least with assessing water quality, that's something that like is done and should at least be done is looking at aquatic organisms and how many you have and also how diverse the species
Mm-hmm.
are and doing those counts because if we start seeing populations declining then that means the water quality is also most likely declining as well. But if we see them thriving, then the water quality we would assume is um, at okay or better than other water systems. So
Mm-hmm.
aquatic organisms are definitely like a really big key indicator about at least initial observation about how
Okay.
well your water system is actually doing.
Yep. And some are better than others. Like I put an article in here from the EPA about I just looked up on benthic invertebrates, which are a popular way to index how healthy your water systems are, and a lot of it depends on where you live. This is for a lot of the U.S. Obviously, other places in the world will have a different index that they would use of species that I think they would consider a healthy ratio to have in there. But that's exactly what I thought about when you mentioned that, Michael. Is that exactly? We look at these types of things to see if it's healthy or not. Now, those are also fun studies, Lauren. I'm sure you've done where you've gone in and got around and collected caddisfly larvae and plecopteras and all the rest and counted them and somehow came up with a weird estimate of health or not health in the system.
Yeah, yeah. I've gotten to do that and also gotten to like count some fish and different mussel species. So I will say I find the insect ones the hardest to do just because of how small they all are.
Mm-hmm.
At least the ones that I've gotten to count before.
I've always worried that I've missed them because they're so small. I'm like, well, what if I turned over this other rock and there were like two more that my data would have been different. So, but that's why more data is better. It gets more into the scientific, method and thinking about how much data you need to be convincing. Um, and I also think it's important to mention amphibians as indicator species of health as well. We often hear about frogs and salamanders as being good indicators of uh, how well something is doing. So, any thoughts on that? Either frogs or salamanders or anything?
I have not counted frogs or salamanders, but I do know that they are good indicators for water health and ecosystem health.
Yep.
So at least that
Because
should show that.
they absorb all the water through their skin. That's why
Oh
they.
yeah,
So if there's something toxic in there, often they're the first to have issues
yeah.
with that. Speaking of testing for water, we'll get into this. So my main I have a couple of questions for you. This is
Sure.
from a teacher, and also this goes to what we've had in the chat already as well. Um, there are two ways mainly that I can collect, especially quantitative data, right? Or even just to see if something's present or not. We have the water monitoring kits, right? So this is a popular Lamont kit. You've probably seen these before. You've done outreach. You've probably used these before as well, right? You're like, oh yeah, 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 those. Yeah, I've seen those before, right? We have those kits. I have had this for years. Never used it. Um, and we also have, I tweeted out a picture of this earlier. You also have probeware, right?
Oh yes.
Right, and this is like temperature probe, right? You put the one end and then it has a digital readout that you can then read, with data as well. And my question is, and this is a Vernier system. I don't know if you've
Okay.
ever used Vernier, but it's a popular teacher system to use. Here's a little readout Vernier. I won't hook it up right now. Um, I could. Um, which is better, the chemical method or the probeware method?
So at least,
Or you can say neither. It depends on what you're doing. That's okay too.
yeah, I would say it depends on what you're doing. I would say like if you're doing temperature and like pH and stuff, like the probe is gonna be a lot easier to use for that. But you could always double check your probe's pH reading by using like pH paper.
Mhm.
But then for other things, like if you're looking at metals or if you're looking at like water hardness or alkalinity or acidity or
Mhm.
nitrates or nitrites, and those would probably be um, better done chemically, or you might get like more accurate readings than with the probe because you may see like the probe readings kind of like fluctuate a little bit depending on where you're sampling with the water.
Mhm.
But they complement each other though. There's measurements you can do with a probe, like dissolved oxygen, you can do chemically or with a probe. And so it's actually
Mhm.
really cool to sort of like do both and then kind of see like how on target you are
Right.
with
These
that.
are the dissolved oxygen pieces, I think. The one thing I will note sometimes for dissolved oxygen is since it does use chemicals, it's safer to use the probeware.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
That's the other thing. It's like at least with a probe, you're not dealing with any chemicals, but
Mhm.
it, yeah, I'd say that they're very complementary to
Right.
each
I mean,
other.
like if you were gonna like do your research, right? You're gonna go test. I mean, you're gonna take samples. What are you going to use as the PhD candidate?
Yeah, so at least what I do with water testing is I'll take a probe out or multiple probes depending on because I have a probe that measures a lot of things with just like one of them, but some
Cool,
you
cool.
only have like single measurements too. So I'll take out like one or multiple probes and kind of at least measure what I call physiochemical characteristics of the water. So kind of get like pH readings, water temperature, try and do dissolved oxygen with the probe, and then like total dissolved solids, conductivity, and salinity of kind of like the water and where I'm sampling at. And then we'll also then collect water samples and test those water samples with chemical tests. Um, and then the probe data kind of serves as to sort of understand the water conditions when we sampled. And so that way, when we get the data back, because the things I'm interested in are metals, like kind of looking to see how the physiochemical characteristics of the water influenced metal concentrations and whether we see any correlations like, oh, oxygen was at this value and we saw this peak with this specific metal and that was very consistent, and then that at least allows us to correlate and
Okay.
at least advise for later on too, and
Hmm.
be like, hey, you may want to try and like make the water sort of, if you're releasing it from a dam, because a lot of our water systems, there's a dam on them at some point where they release and don't release water, and then at least we
Hmm.
can sort of advise and be like, hey, at this point in the year, you may want to release more water, so that way the physiochemical stuff remains at this point, so we don't it completely pollute the water system, or like you may not want to do that and so forth. So
Awesome. I do have something else. I have a lot of things to say. Um,
okay.
Desh, thanks for hanging out. And Desh does have a question I want to get to. Um, he asks, do you think there are going to be more geothermal power plants in the future? I know this isn't your expertise, but you might have an opinion or thoughts.
I Yeah, it's not my area of expertise, but I think so because at least there seems to be, at least right now, more of like a push for other alternative energy um, types, and I think geothermal might be one that takes off a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But that's my opinion.
Yep. And I'll also add, Dash, that geothermals, it can be used everywhere, but in very limited places as well. So like everybody at their house could put in a geothermal system to moderate their heat. But a geothermal power plant, as you mentioned, that can only be done in very few specific places in the United States and in the world, as it is. So, I personally, I think that if you had more people have geothermal installations at their house, it would make a bigger effect than power plants, because it's just, you would cut down the amount of air conditioning and the amount of heating that you would need, and hot water if you use it to make hot water. So that's just my opinion. Same thing. My opinion is, instead of building these huge solar farms, if you just put solar panels on every roof of every house and every building, that'd be so much more, But I'm just crazy like that, I guess. um, Back to the river discussion, I thought of something, a research study that was done, and I think it was on the Colorado River, where they started releasing water from the dams at a certain point, and they found that doing that reinvigorated certain species that really had gone dormant and had stopped existing there. And I found that fascinating, and also consider most rivers in the United States are dammed somewhere in the watershed. There's small streams that aren't, but especially in the East Coast where it was settled. The primary way of, like, they were all dammed up for various reasons, because that's how they got energy, up and
Right.
So there are many, many, many dams, and so that is something that, like you said, either I know in New York they started breaking a lot of these really old ones from like the early 1800s, that were just sitting there preventing spawning and things like that. And they've seen like herring come back to certain rivers because they took out these dams.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's definitely been happening. And I know with American rivers, they keep highlighting like dam removal success stories. Because like you were saying, like some dams are like really old, and all
Mm-hmm.
dams have a lifespan, and sometimes it's easier just to demolish the dam than to try and like keep it going and keep it sustaining. And um but yeah, no, it does bring back wildlife though that
Mm-hmm.
previously it kind of like disappeared, which is really interesting that they come back, even if
Yep.
it's been like decades. It's like they know.
And I think we saw that also, which is very promising. I like to see hope,
Oh yeah,
um, because there's so much, doom and gloom when it comes to
yeah,
the environment.
yeah.
Um, that we saw over COVID, when people stopped traveling to like beaches and going out, all of a sudden these areas where there were no, the populations of certain animals had declined, all of a sudden, they just came back. And I think that's promising, that once people leave stuff alone, uh, nature finds a way.
Yeah, no, that was really inspiring to see, at least with like seeing the dolphins return and other
Mm-hmm.
stuff related to just like the environment in general that we're improving. It was kind of like we haven't been like kind of staying at home that long, and we've already seen this significant like
Mm-hmm.
environmental improvement. But at least with the United States, like I'll map out human influence index, which is kind of like human impact on the environment, and then the designated impaired waters of the United States that are
Mm-hmm.
listed by the EPA. And all the impaired waters correlate where you have all these like red hot spots of where you have high levels of human influence, and that's where like all the impaired waters are at. Like everywhere you have a red spot, you have an impaired water system. So I thought that was really interesting that you don't see
Mm-hmm.
that where you have levels of like low human influence, and it's just correlates very strongly to where there's high human influence on the
Mm-hmm.
environment.
Yep. And I think a lot of that, I know, in New York State is because of sewage affecting water quality. because we are dirty people. We got to clean up after ourselves. Um, and, I agree, Michael, you wrote, alternative energy like water or solar power is clean, but it can cause some unwanted issues. For example, a hydro dam can affect, marine life, indirectly or directly, as well.
Yeah.
And I think when I try to teach about this, there's there always seems to be a cost to go with the benefit. We want to have our ice cream and air conditioning, but at the same time, we don't want to block the spawning route of salmon. So,
Yeah, yeah. And some of this stuff is, I mean, I don't want to say it's new, but at least when they first started out, like doing the dams, it was like geared for flood controllers so that they could have more like towns or cities in one location, or if they needed to divert water to another region. And there wasn't like the consideration of like, oh, how is that going to impact the environment, or how is that going to impact the water quality, or is this going to cause somewhere to dry up or like harm the wildlife? But then you had more scientists who looked into it and studied it, and it was like, oh, that wasn't like the best idea because
mm-hmm.
these are all the negatives that happened. But so
And I think, and I haven't seen the data yet for this, but the difference between Katrina and Ida here that we just had, it's one of the what we over engineered, I think, for like Katrina, right? It was the dikes and the dams and the levees, whereas since that time, we've come to understand that we need those wetlands. And I know one of the engineering things that they did since then was to have areas where it would flood on purpose, certain areas, and it seems to have worked. It's just, I don't know. I'm not out there doing the research, but I'm sure somebody is, and they're like, "Oh, look, the flooding wasn't as bad because we had the floodwaters go into wetlands, in natural areas instead of into people's homes."
yeah, yeah, I think you're right about that. It's kind of like another example of science is always, I guess science and engineering is always improving. Like,
Fixing its own mistakes, I think, is a better way to put it.
we kind of like learn from what happens, and then it's like, okay, that happened, so how can we mitigate it so it doesn't happen again? And then we improve and continue building upon
Mm-hmm.
the initial thing.
Well, a lot of this also builds habitat for natural systems, including mussels, which I know is your beloved uh, creatures.
Yeah, just really like mussels.
Do you still follow mussels? I mean, like, do you like not follow like on Twitter, but do you still, like look into mussel research and like go out there and you're like, oh, mussels, or do you just go to the restaurant and you're like, these taste great?
I guess I still keep up with mussels. Like, I still read papers about mussels, and when I go visit water systems, like, I'll kind of be like, are there mussels out here? Like, can I find some? But yeah, I get sad though when I'm in the grocery store and I see like mussels that you can buy and eat, and I'm like, how dare you? But also, like, I know what's in them. I mean, not what's in those particular mussels, but I know how they work. And I'm like, I wouldn't eat them, but that's my opinion. So.
There's a lot of things people eat that they shouldn't eat.
That is true. So,
But garlic and butter on anything, good.
that's a good point, though. Like, yeah, there's that combination of anything, like, would be very solid.
Awesome. So, another thing I want to talk to you about besides my wonderful questions, I want to keep asking you about sampling because I have
Okay.
other questions about this while I have you here. Now that I was thinking about it, when you sample water, where do you get your sample from? Like, if I want to know the health of a stream, like, do I just go to the edge of it and just stick the probe in there, or I put my little piece of pH paper in there, or do I have to go to the middle? Or do I have to do a cross section of the entire stream?
Yeah, so that question is, I guess the answer to that one's highly dependent upon what you're going to do with the data. So
Hmm.
if you wanted to, um, like publish it, then ideally what you would want to do is kind of do a transect and so cover the entire channel of the water system and get like one point that's kind of along like both edges, but then also get one in the middle and kind of average it out, and that'll sort of be like your average um, value for the particular parameter you're looking at. But if you're kind of just doing it for outreach purposes or as an example, then in theory you could collect it off of like the edge and you wouldn't necessarily have to go into the middle. um, Ideally the middle part of it's gonna be more accurate just because the edges are obviously influenced by other factors that kind of get washed out a bit as you get towards the middle of a water system. Um, but um, yeah, you could. It's highly dependent upon what you're planning on
Yep.
doing with the data.
And are there tests where you can take a sample and then take it back to the lab? I know dissolved oxygen is one you can't, right? Because that you don't want to shake it because then it'll mess it up.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So with that, water samples are, in theory, if you take them back to a lab and you refrigerate them, they should be okay. But obviously, if you refrigerate it, you're going to mess up your oxygen value. So oxygen should get like measured before you do that. Um, and then they should be okay. Otherwise, the EPA has methods too where they recommend you can acidify your water samples, and that will at least preserve metals in solution and stop them from plating out for at least like 6 months. So you can test water when you're back in the lab as long as you refrigerate it or acidify it. And the other thing about water collection is you also want to get where the water flow is about average. So like you don't want to sample, you have like one spot that has really fast flowing water, but the rest of
Right.
it's not flowing a lot of fast, then you kind of want to go where the average flow is at then.
So not where it's like really wide, not where it's really skinny, but in between.
Yeah, yeah. And it's kind of like what looks like the average to you. Yeah, because that flow rate can sort of get you sometimes.
Right. All right. Another question. Are the purity or color of pearls from mussels and oysters and stuff like that by water freshness? Like black pearls, does it mean a mussel it came from like impure or impaired water?
Okay, that is a really good question. And like, I haven't actually considered that. But,
I remember
the
reading about it somewhere, but I don't remember.
the pearls the mussels make, believe, are, I think it's from like trapped sediment or something gets trapped in them. So I don't believe it's due to the water quality, the coloration of it. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's due to whether you have ferric versus um, more so, I guess, lighter minerals or lighter elements in the water. But that's a really good question.
So is it? I mean, like, yeah, I would think it might have something to do with like the substrate that it's part of.
Yeah, I think it's gonna come down to like the whatever dominant elements you have in the water. That's a good question.
Well, let's look it up on Google.
Let's do that because I'm really intrigued now. 'Cause I hadn't even
The
thought
color of a pearl is determined by
by the
is
water quality.
nope,
Oh.
determined genetically by the host.
Oh.
Different types of mollusks can produce pearls in many colors. So
Okay. That makes sense.
that's what that says. I'm not going to trust that. Let's find another source. That was some jewelry site. A lot of these are like.
I mean, I'm not a biologist.
Okay.
That was a really good
I
question.
don't know. I know. Let's see.
I hadn't even thought about that.
Okay, this one says. Pearl color is a key factor to understand when buying pearls. Often, pearl color is influenced by the color of the mollusk's lip, the outer part of the shell. You would know what that is since you're familiar with the morphology of these mollusks. Tahitian pearls get their light to dark charcoal gray colors from the black-lipped saltwater.
Ooh, there's also an organic substance called, I'm gonna butcher this, like conchiolin. I'm so sorry to anyone who studies this word. Um, it holds or glues the layers of crystalline aragonite together, and within that layer are microscopic pigments from which pearls can inherit their color. All of these answers are fascinating.
I'm looking at the same page you are, I think.
Okay, that's cool.
It has pictures. It's good.
Well, that's convenient.
Now, yeah. So there you go. We kind of answered your question. Not that you couldn't Google it yourself, but
It's a good question. I haven't even considered like pearl color with mussels. I'm like all about their growth layers and their tissues and stuff. And I don't know. Never had to deal with
pretty
their pearl.
cool. Yeah. Who would have thought? Good questions. That's what it's all about. I love good questions, especially when my students ask good questions. You know, and then we look it up together, just like we did here. Because I usually don't know the answer. But I can guess. We can make some kind of hypothesis like we did. We were wrong, for the most part.
Yeah, we were very wrong.
But
we made a hypothesis.
I mean, you have a 1 in 2 chance. It's either environmental or genetic, right? I mean,
I went with the geology answer. I went with the geology version of the answer, not the biology one, but it's a 50-50 shot. And...
Okay. What the heck? Sorry, my air purifier decided to start beeping at me.
Oh, that's good. It was like
wonderful.
a fire alarm going off.
No, that's $40 that just went out of my wallet. That's what.
Oh, that's not good.
These filters. The filters cost money. Anyways, great questions. Keep asking those questions, because we will all learn something as a result of those fabulous questions. So, we are happy to entertain those. So my goal for this year is myself. I'd like to get my students outside to our stream to do some sampling, and this is a purely selfish questions, of course. No, anyone that watches this can glean information, and I can share this with others. Because when I had done sampling a long time ago, it was all with these types of things, and you know it was always a big endeavor because you got to get the gloves on, you got to put the goggles on, you got to get to see it, and you got to do the whole bit. Probes, yeah, just easy. As long as you don't drop them in the water, we're fine. And so my goal is to get out and do some research. Should be good.
Yeah.
And see what the water is like. So we're gonna start off, like as you saw that Twitter post. I'm having it posted in my classroom on the fish tank, and so we'll see what the temperature and what the dissolved oxygen content of the fish tank is, and if it's safe for more fish.
Nice.
And then I think what we're going to do is we will vote on what fish we want to put in there based on the parameters that are already in there. So that's what I think
That's
we're going to do.
great.
And I might have you a couple for my earth science people. Lauren, I might give you an email back and have you come in and talk to my earth science sections,
Oh yeah,
possibly.
definitely. Be totally down to do that.
So that would be fun. They'd be surprised. They'd be like, "What? What's going on? This
Whoa,
is so weird."
water science.
Yeah, and then there's other sections of lab that I don't teach, and then they'd all be jealous. They're like, "Oh, you guys went outside and sampled water, and you got to talk to Lauren. Oh, that's so unfair." And then I'll be like, "Yeah, we also had pizza."
Oh, that'll really drive
What?
that.
God dang! No, I'm nuts.
We'll have everyone wanting to switch into your lab after that.
That's the whole idea. No, I won't torture them too much with food. That's just not fair. It is during our lunch period, so I'm kind of iffy right now because like lunch this year is weird because of COVID, and so we have lunch is at the same time as lab, but they can't have the lunch in lab, of course, and so I have no idea how this is going to work out because I need a good chunk of time to get outside.
Yeah,
If I have 45-minute class, all right,
yeah.
that means I've got 10 minutes to walk down to the stream, maybe 20 minutes to actually do sampling, and then the 10 minutes to come back, and then we got to clean up. So uh, it'll be tough. We can do it though.
Uh, uh, and then if not, like there's always the it's not as much fun as getting to do it like on site on the stream, but if you collect it in like large enough containers, you should have enough like space to do probe testing in the container of the water sample. But it's not as much fun as being on site.
Exactly. I mean, I took limnology in college. One of the best parts of that class was like going on site and like trompsing through swamps and canoeing on lakes and you know all kinds of fun stuff like that. That's what was fun about it.
Oh yeah, that's like the hardcore stuff. It's like, yeah, I went out there,
Hmm.
I walked through all that swampy land, like I earned my data.
I got my data. Yeah, because that is the second best. I can go down there myself and collect it in buckets and bring it back, and
Yeah,
it's just not the same. I will say it's kids are funny, and I don't know if have you done like field research with students yourself? Have you gone out in the field?
Oh yeah, I have.
Yeah, there's always a few that hate it.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And they're like, I'm not gonna go outside. There's bugs. And you're like, yeah, but we're going outside. You know, I'm all excited. Like at least, 2/3 of the rest of the kids are excited, but there's that other third that are like, gross.
Oh yeah.
And
We definitely see that.
what do you do as a science educator to kind of get kids to overcome that aversion to going outside?
Yeah, I guess I've kind of it's always been the minority about it's like majority of them will be excited to go outside, but then you always have like the small number that's not excited or isn't excited, then they don't show up like with the right shoes or show up in like or not like the right outfit for going out into the field either. Um, but I guess I kind of, at least before taking them outside and having them do it, I try and find out like what sort of interests them, or at least like what one of their like favorite things is either related to the location we're gonna be at or just like in general. And I found that can sort of be really helpful in doing that because I've even had students who don't want to go outside, but like they really like video games, and one of the video games they like is somehow there's something in there that's related to something we're gonna go look at. And I'm like, well, we're gonna go to this, which is just like the same as in your video game. And they're like, oh my gosh, like sign me up. And then like the first one's out the door then after that. So I guess
Yep.
I try and make it. I guess I try and relate to them, or at least think about.
You make it relevant. Yeah.
Yeah, I try and find something that they're interested in that can be correlated to whatever it is that we're going to be doing out there, and try and do that. Sometimes it's not successful anyway. They're just very determined to not want to go out there, but most of the time it typically works if you can find something to sort of relate to them with or make it relatable out there. Even just going like, when I was your age, I also didn't want to do this, but here I am anyway. And they're like, you were my age. You didn't like to do this. Sometimes that works too. So, yeah.
Oh yeah. I also love it when like I'll tell them, all right, we're going outside next class, right? And then the kid shows up. I'm like, all right, we're going outside. They're like, I have my $200 Jordans on. I'm not going outside. I'm like, I have the rubber boots you can wear, because I have rubber boots in my class because that's the way I am. And they're like, no, I'll wear the Jordans. It's like, I offered you boots, and then they get dirty, and then they get pissed, and they're like, oh. But anyways, proper footwear for science. It's very important. Listen to your teacher.
Shoes ruined by not wearing proper footwear. And too many feet ruined too, because sometimes people wear flip flops out, and there's some environments where it'll be okay, but there's others where it's like you're gonna really hurt your feet if you do that. But
because you think you're just going in water and you're gonna be like, oh, I'm gonna be fine. I'm in flip flops, but they're sharp things, like like mussels.
Yeah, and like the rocks in general, and I've eaten it like in rivers. Like I'll wade out there thinking I'm okay, and like I'll either walk straight into this rock or just like slip on this piece of moss or something and just wind up like in the water. And it's like
at a certain level, you just have to assume you're gonna get wet.
You really do, yeah.
At least I assume as a teacher when I go out with students, we're doing water stuff. Because we've done some stuff in the past that I'm like, I'm probably gonna get wet.
Oh yeah. I like travel with a towel now if I'm gonna go do water stuff because I'm like I'm gonna get wet and probably muddy, and henceforth I have a towel with me, so we should be okay.
Nice.
I think there was one time I forgot a towel and like had to use a trash bag instead, and like sit on that so I didn't like drench the vehicle and stuff. It worked. It was good improvisation, but towel would have been better. So.
Hi Philip, how you doing? You are back as a science lover. Well, we love you for being a science lover. We appreciate you being here. How's it going? We've been talking water quality. I know you were talking about that earlier. You missed our discussion on boiling water. Now, another way to treat water, right? And Philip knows this. Besides boiling it, is to add stuff to it.
Yes. That's also really fun to do. Yeah.
So, Philip, can you tell us? I know you're in chat now. You're listening. Can you tell us what stuff? Microfiber towel. All right, that's one way you could clean water, I suppose. What stuff would you put in it? What's that chemical called that you put in water? There's a couple of them, I think. And don't say vodka. Iodine tablets. All right, in your survival kit. All right. That'll treat the water. It won't get rid of the heavy metals, but it won't make them more concentrated, right, Lauren?
Right. Yeah.
So.
It's like a really cool experiment you can do where if you have alum, which you can just like buy in the spice aisle of a grocery store, and if you put that in your water sample and stir it up for like 5 minutes, and then I guess, okay, you can do it 2 ways. You can just stir it for 5 minutes and then kind of like pour it through a pebbly sand mixture, and that kind of acts like as another filter. And then if you test the water like before doing that and after doing that, you'll actually see some of your stuff like drop in concentration. Like I did that for one
Hmm.
water sample for iron, and it went from being like in the ppm range down into the part per billion range, and I was like mind blown because I was just doing it like for fun, and it was really cool. And then
Hmm.
otherwise, you can like mix the lung powder with boiling water and pour that into your water sample and let it sit for 15 minutes. And in theory, you'll start seeing these like flocculants at like the top of your water, which is kind of a lot of like the dissolved particulates and other stuff kind of getting pulled out of solution. And then if you can just knock that part off, then you now have like cleaner water than you originally started out with.
Hmm. Now you could also use, if you had like, so I'm thinking like my fish tank, it has a carbon filter,
Oh yeah, carbon works
because
too.
that would be a good before and after as well. See, I'm thinking of good experiments to do. We could make like really disgusting water,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And then test it before. You could even do like turbidity if you wanted as well,
Oh yeah.
and pour it through different filters and see which one like is the best filter.
Yeah, that would be really cool to do because some of them
Hmm.
work better with certain parameters and then others. So it would actually be really, at least I would think it would be interesting. But then I like water science
No,
too.
my brain is like going crazy now. So, like doing separating mixtures out of my eighth graders, we could design a filtration method, and some might use a coffee filter, right? Like you said, Philip. Maybe someone will use a bandana. Maybe someone will use a bandana with carbon. Maybe someone will use, um, I know I could have all kinds of weird stuff for them to use. Sand, because even sand makes a pretty good filter. Um, and then give them some disgusting like water of some kind, and then see who can get the cleanest water out of it, and maybe put something I can test before and after.
Oh yeah, like you could pick like one thing to test, or even like a couple, like
Oh, you know
whatever
what?
you
You know what
do.
I could do? I could also do. We could do a pH test. I could just put vinegar in it and see if it'll like the pH will change before and after.
Yeah,
That would be interesting too. Oof. That just means a lot more work for me if I have to do that.
I will volunteer to join your science lab as like a student.
Wouldn't char cloth work? Yeah, I think char cloth would work because it's basically like charcoal, and I think you can use charcoal as a filter as well, just like you can use a carbon filter because it's just carbon. Um, it's not activated carbon, or I don't even know the difference between regular what a carbon would be and activated carbon. I'd have to look that up.
Yeah.
How can we tell? See, all these questions, you guys are great. Michael, how can we tell the difference between mussel and oyster pearls?
Mussel and oyster pearls.
I think
Ugh.
oysters are rounder, if I'm not mistaken. But
Yeah, I know
I'm guessing
pearls,
again.
not pearls. What to be like pearls? Oysters. I know oysters have more of like a like rough, dull, like hard outer shell, whereas mussel shells are more like smooth and can kind of like a more almost like a really dark brown or like blackish color, but they have really smooth shells. But as far as their pearls go, I'm not sure how you would compare their pearls or how that works.
Well, guess what? You now have your PhD research ready for you, Michael. You can go do your study and compare mussel and oyster pearls. And I'm sure someone's done that study already. You just have to do a little bit of research. Um, we don't know. I think activated carbon is actually carbon that was caused or activated like char cloth. Could be wrong about that though. Okay, it's something I can look up later, if I remember to, and I so desire. By the way, wait, he's typing now.
just looked it up. I guess seawater pearls come from oysters and freshwater pearls come from mussels. I don't know if that was just
Well,
one
yeah,
story.
but if I had two, right, how would I know the difference, right? If I had two pearls in my hand, I would be like, all right, I know this one is, you know, from a mussel and this one's from a pearl. How would I know? The color
Yeah, I
might,
do
maybe,
not
I don't
know.
know. You have to ask. Maybe a mussel could tell the difference.
Like, please tell me. Like, I think there's muscle experts out there who.
Okay. So your iodine tablets came with pH tablets to clear the color as well as get rid of the iodine taste. Okay. Makes sense. I don't remember what iodine tastes like. Of course, I don't know. Have I ever tasted iodine? I'm trying to think if I've ever done that when I was in Scouts. If we actually ever treated the water, then drank it just to see what it was like. I may have, but I don't remember if I did. Hmm.
I'm not sure if I've had iodine or drinking water with iodine. I don't know.
The next time they like put iodine before they give you stitches or something, just lick it and
It'd
see
be
what
like,
it's.
hold on, I need to
Hold on,
figure
yeah.
out. I need to do science right now, guys.
It's a chemical. Now, Philip, everything's chemicals, so that's like a non-statement. I tell my students that too. They're like, "It's a chemical." I'm like, water's a chemical.
It's true.
It's, is it a pure substance or a mixture? No, usually that's what they mean. They're like, "Oh, it's a." Uh, well, it's iodine. It depends because iodine doesn't exist by itself. It's an ion, right? So iodine's always combined with some other chemical. Usually, it's like potassium iodine. Um, I believe is what is usually is used. Right. So it's an ionic compound specifically. So, but I think it's potassium iodide, but I don't know. Because there's also they have the different iodine that they use for like radiation as well, prevent radiation poisoning or whatever.
Yeah.
Yes, water is a compound as well. Very good. I'm glad we're getting into some nice basic science here. Getting me prepped for the school year. Getting my brain going.
They're really testing you out here. They're like, all right.
getting the brain going. Get my brain going. Think about it. I'll do everything we're talking about the chemical structure of water to actually testing water. I mean, it the whole gamut.
That would be
So,
awesome. Like, that'd be a really cool lab.
so you go look at the bottle that's in. All right, good. You do that. We are going to wrap up this chat because I need to go to bed because I have work tomorrow. I know it's a quick stream; it's only an hour, but appreciate you being here, everyone in the chat as well as Lauren. And I really don't want to stop talking, but I have to be mature about this and make good decisions for myself. Um, so the next chat will be on the 15th, and on the 15th, and I'm going to probably not get her name right. Priyanka Kushwaha. She will be here to talk about soil science. So,
Oh, nice.
yeah.
Nice.
And I believe she's at the University of Arizona. I think I'll put her name in the chat. Yep, you can put it on Discord. So I have some good questions for her as well. So, and then also the 29th, Evolazzi will be here. He's a evolutionary biologist and streamer. So that's for September. So
Nice.
fun times.
Oh,
We got some good stuff. And then I'm looking for people for October still. I got one for October, but many more. I'm only doing every other week, Lauren, because I think I'd go crazy. Last year was like awesomely like so uh busy. Um,
I'm sure.
but it's fantastic. So thank you for being here, and I wish you much success this year. We will be in touch, I am sure. I'll be picking your brain some more about the expert uh, for sampling water. And I'm hoping to do this, and I appreciate all your input and your support of the sciences and getting the word of science out to the public. It's wonderful.
Thanks for having me. This has been great. And yeah, definitely we can totally chat some more about water and stuff because I will. I always like talking water with people. So.
Awesome, because that's what you do.
Like, if anyone wants to chat water, I'm down to do that. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, awesome, everybody. I am going to say good night to you, and I will see you on Friday is my next stream. We'll be playing some more Below Zero. Bye.